And it's just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Rory Sears, N.M.D, naturopathic medical doctor. Thanks so much for coming over today.
Thank you for having me.
So Dr. Rory Sears is a naturopathic doctor providing holistic care for patients in and around Phoenix, Arizona at the Phoenix Anti-Aging Clinic located in the Ahwatukee area, which is right across the street from my dental office.
Yep, right on 48th Street.
It's what?
Right off of 48th Street.
Yeah, L8 and 48th Street. So you're probably, when you're backed up at that light every morning trying to get to I-10, he's right there.
You can see us, yeah.
And how long have you been there?
I've been there for going on 3 years now. The practice itself has been there for about 7.
Nice. So it's at the Phoenix Anti-Aging Clinic located in the Ahwatukee area of Phoenix. Dr. Sears offers men and women the most advanced care options based on their needs, including IV treatment and injections and state-of-the-art naturopathic pain management options, as well as treatments for anxiety and depression, insomnia, adrenal fatigue, hormonal disorders, autoimmune disease, and high blood pressure. Dr. Sears completed his undergraduate degree in human physiology at College of Medicine at the University of Arizona, followed by his medical degree from the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine, located right here in Tempe, Arizona.
In Tempe, yes.
And specializing in both modern and alternative medicine. In addition to offering patients a comprehensive array of treatment options for acute and chronic illness, he is also skilled in advanced diagnostic techniques aimed at determining the root causes of symptoms to help guide care. Dr. Sears enjoys caring for new patients, and the practice accepts most major medical insurance. So the first question everybody wants to know is, are you related to the Sears and Roebuck empire? When you were little, did you get to have everything?
Yeah, I still get
catalog?
this question quite a lot, and it's still the same answer. I wish that I was.
You know, it's funny because when I was little, sitting around my 5 sisters looking at the Sears catalog, that was half the holiday season, just looking at all that stuff.
Circling the things that you want.
And what's also very weird is Amazon is just the same thing as Sears. I mean, Sears had a catalog to all the houses. You ordered your things, and they had the biggest distribution center, and it went under right when Amazon started.
Curious.
Because what it was Walmart. Half of America lives in 147 metros, and they were afraid to go into a big city with Sears and Gibson's and TG&Y and all that stuff. Right. But those stores never went to the rural, where the other half of America lived in 19,000 towns, and that's where Sears made bank, because they could sell you all this stuff without having to have a store and employees and health insurance. But as Sam Walton grew, he started the year I was born, 62, as he crawled around the rural, eventually the Sears catalog didn't work anymore, because why would you look in a catalog if you go see the merchandise in the store? Yeah. And right when they decided to finally pull the plug on that, if they would have just had the vision of getting the Amazon.com website, they had the whole distribution center that Amazon's been trying to rebuild.
Sure. Looking back on it, it seems like a natural progression, but if they would have had that forethought, then they would have been on top of the game.
Notice how he said a natural progression, because he's a naturopath.
I do.
Nice, well played, Doc. So I think it's very informative. I think people in Ahwatukee just wonder, people have probably different diseases around the world and different treatments. What are you doing in Ahwatukee? What have you been doing the last 3 years? What kind of patients do you see? What treatments are you doing? What keeps you busy all day long?
Sure. So it's a fairly wide variety, but I would say my specialty and most of my Ahwatukee clients are middle-aged men and women, and so a lot of our therapies are concentrated on hormone replacement or what would fall under the umbrella of anti-aging. So a lot of people are interested that as they age, they start to see certain declines in energy or mood or focus or weight gain, things of that nature. And so they're coming to me to discuss those issues and figure out how we can improve their overall health or take a more preventative approach to preventing that further breakdown of the body as they continue to age, or what I like to call healthy aging.
So anti-aging, when I was in dental school 30 years ago, that term didn't exist. Kind of like sleep apnea.
Right.
I got it all the way out of dental school and never had heard those words. When did anti-aging pop up, and what is it really?
Well, going through medical school, even for me, I graduated 2013 there. That wasn't a term that was thrown around a lot then either. And it just so happened that the founder of the clinic there, who was a mentor of mine, he named it that. And during his progression, or when he was just starting out in practice, that was kind of a buzzword. A lot of people were interested in kind of this retarding the aging process. And so
when he started, your mentor, you mean when you started Ahwatukee?
When he started in Ahwatukee, yes.
7 years ago, you said?
Seven
and who was
years
that?
ago. So his name was Dr. Caviola. He's since moved on to San Diego, but he kind of laid the groundwork there.
And he got there, and then the football team left, so I bet he's wishing he was back in
Right.
Phoenix with the Arizona Cardinals.
Very well, maybe.
How about them Chargers?
Although the Cardinals aren't looking so hot this year either, so but there's time left for that. Yeah, and so it's something I kind of fell into, and I think nationwide you see it as something that was synonymous with a lot of hormone replacement therapies or testosterone replacement, bioidentical hormone replacement, which a lot of people are interested in for menopause. And then also a lot of the IV or regenerative type therapies would fall into that category, as well as some regenerative pain injections such as prolotherapy, PRP. These are things that kind of approach the situation from a little bit different angle and help actually regenerate joints or bring more movement, mobility, function to the joints rather than just removing pain.
So let's go back to anti-aging. So bioidentical, that means that if you give them a hormone, like say testosterone for a man, it's exactly the same chemical as the human makes it.
That your body makes.
And they used to bust all the professional athletes because when they would buy steroids, they'd be from labs in Russia and China, and they wouldn't be bioidentical.
Lots of times, yes. They wouldn't be bioidentical, or they'd be using these different analogs that are potentially much stronger than the bioidentical form.
Because if you are supplementing for hormones in a race with bioidentical molecules, they can't really bust you for being on the hormone, can they? But they can if they say this is only found in horses and test tubes, but not if it's bioidentical.
And what they'll look at in those cases is your physiological levels, right? So a lot of the people who are maybe abusing those therapies are using the bioidenticals, but they're using it in double the dose that might be found naturally in your body, and so of course that would show up as being something that was abnormal. But
so you've been here now 3 years. Like how many clients do you have on anti-aging therapy?
It's hard to say. I would be in the hundreds.
Hundreds of people in Ahwatukee. See, I think that's why this is so fascinating. I mean, you watch the news, they just want to talk about Trump and Putin and North Korea.
Right.
And I want to hear about a guy that lives in Tukey that's treating hundreds of people with anti-aging.
Sure.
And how old are they? Give us a breakdown of like men versus women.
Men typically run 35 to about 70.
35 to 70, and if your anti-aging clients are men, is it half men, half women? Or
probably a 60-40 split towards men.
60% men.
Yeah.
And they're between 35 and 70.
Yeah, so pretty wide gamut. And then women typically 40 to about 60.
40 to 60. Huh. And so you're 60% men, 40% women, and the men are 35 to age 70, and the women are 40 to 60. So do you treat them the same, or is it pretty different, being a man hormones, male hormones?
Definitely men and women are very different hormone-wise. Complexities change, or there's a lot more variables when you're dealing with bioidentical hormone replacement in a female versus a male. And within that, too, the way I like to treat my patients is on a very individual basis. So I might have five males come in that are interested in hormone replacement therapy, or they're going down that road.
But I'm trying to get to, because maybe you might be able to help me right here. Why is the man coming in 35 to 70? Is it because of is it erectile dysfunction? Is it Is it lack of energy?
A myriad of issues. Typically, fatigue is number one.
Fatigue.
So gentlemen are coming in, they're just not feeling like they have the energy that they used to. They're waking up tired, or they hit that midway point in the day and they're exhausted. They don't have any energy left.
But don't you think that's all from being married with children?
Some of them are married with children.
You send them to a divorce attorney and say, you need to walk. No, I'm just teasing.
Some of them are not married though, and so but it's a very common pattern to see that, especially with the chronic stress that people are under, with work stress, financial stress, relationship stress. All these things kind of build on themselves, and once you hit your 30s, 40s, 50s, it seems like it starts to break the camel's back, so to speak, and that's when these symptoms start to show up in men. You mentioned erectile dysfunction or low libido is another very common one that gentlemen are coming in complaining of. Sleep issues, if they're very active or they like to exercise and stuff, they'll start to notice that they can't do as much in the gym as they used to, or they can't lift as much, or they're more fatigued after workouts, or after they do work out, it takes much longer to kind of get back to that baseline. They're sore for longer.
So if someone has that, you come in, you give them a physical, and
typically a lot of what I do is through the lab work. So I like to run a lot of extensive labs, so we get a good idea, or we get a good basis of what's going on internally in the body with the physiology, and then we're comparing that to the symptoms. We're comparing that to how they're feeling, running through their kind of daily routine or their diets, and comparing how that stacks up to what the labs are telling me.
Yeah. So just staying with the men at first. So then, what drugs is it? Is it bioidentical testosterone, like a cream, or is it injection?
There's a few different ways to prescribe them. Most of my clients are doing injectable therapies, so an injectable bioidentical testosterone.
And how often would they have to inject that?
Typically every 7 to 10 days is most common, but it can go all the way up to 14 days for some people.
I hope this doesn't get too personal. This is Ahwatukee Uncensored, and we're adults. And if this is, because I'm going to have some tough questions on this subject. So you hear in Men's Health or GQ magazine that once you start taking testosterone, your testicles atrophy, and then you have to be on it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
True or false?
This is true, and this is a conversation that I have with all of my patients.
Did you think you would be saying testicles today on Dentistry Uncensored podcast?
Testicles. No, I did not, but I'm so used to it by now. It's second nature. But yes, this is a tough conversation that you have with all of my clients who are considering testosterone therapy, because it is a treatment that you're likely going to be on for life, right? And so, especially with some of the younger gentlemen that might come in, they might be in their 30s, and lab-wise, they have low testosterone.
What would a teenage boy in his prime at Desert Vista or Mountain Point or ASU be, and then what would he be, like at 40 or 60? What number is?
Well, there's a couple numbers that we look at. We look at the total testosterone, which is the larger pool that the body makes, and you look at how much is actually free for the body to use, right? And those are important distinctions there. Typically, a total testosterone in a healthy young male is going to be around 800 to 1,000.
Okay.
Right, and then as that starts to decline, I mean, I've seen gentlemen that might be in their late 20s, early 30s that get down as low as 200. Right.
At what age?
As young as late 20s to early 30s. I'll see them there. But that's not the case 100%. I've also seen the opposite where we have a 67-year-old gentleman come in and he's at a 600, 700, doing pretty good.
He tested me before the show and I was 1 million.
1 million off the charts. They had to bring.
I got it. You know how I first got interested in this? I'm not on anti-aging. I mean, but I had a patient, and I don't want to say a name, for HIPAA and all that stuff. And he was, I forgot how old he was, but he was about 75. He had an accident, broke leg, arm, whatever, sat in a wheelchair, and he couldn't get out. He never healed up strong enough to get in the wheelchair. And he kind of threw in the towel and said, I'm 75. He sat in a wheelchair for a year. He had big calluses on his elbows from being in the wheelchair. And so finally, a friend of his told him, go see this anti-aging doctor. But it was at that time, this was back in the day. I mean, he had to drive out to Palm Springs. Mm-hmm. He drove out to Palm Springs. He got on hormone replacement. I mean, a year later, he looked like he was 10 years younger. Mm-hmm. He told everybody, so, and what I thought about that is because I witnessed this with my own eyes. And I thought to myself, why are all the steroids going to Olympic athletes and college football players and guys in the gym? And I almost thought, well, maybe that shouldn't be illegal, because maybe that should, if they want to volunteer and do that on themselves, maybe by watching those people, you could apply that to all the 70, 80, 90. I mean, I got patients that are 100 years old. Sure. And it's like, I don't care if you take testosterone and lift more weights at Gold's Gym or win a medal, because if you go back and study medicine 200 years ago, when they had these ideas, all their friends and family would test it on themselves. Sure. And now you can't test on yourself. Everything's illegal. Sure. And but anyway, sorry to interrupt. But so
I agree with you, and that's part of my mission here in Ahwatukee is, I have a few athletes or guys that are trainers, but most of my clients are average type Joes who are, seeing a decline in certain areas of their life, and they're willing to explore different ways to maintain that. And that's always my goal with patients, is to optimize those levels, right? There's a distinction between doing some hormone therapy and tripling or doubling someone's normal numbers versus just getting them toward the high end of that normal range, right? And that way we must make sure in the body that we have adequate stores of those hormones, because anytime that you're dealing with a hormone or what's called the endocrine system, it affects literally every tissue in your body. And so if you're deficient in one area, right, then a lot of those tissues downstream don't get the support that they need. They don't get the messages that they need. And so it's always my goal just to optimize all those systems and let the body do what it's designed to do with those things.
And the endocrine system, that's the only medication I'm on, is thyroid. I was low thyroid, and I find that interesting because those low thyroids, from when I've been on it for decades, now they're finding that's in a cluster. The low thyroid is also in families with celiac sprue, MS, diabetes. Right, and
thyroid is another condition I treat a fair amount, and it kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of the adrenal fatigue syndromes.
Explain adrenal fatigue.
So the adrenal glands are another endocrine gland. They work very closely with the testes in males and with the thyroid, and they're responsible for adapting to stress, right? And so they secrete.
And tell them where the adrenal glands are.
Adrenal glands sit right on top of the kidneys here, tiny glands in the back. But this day and age, probably one of the most important glands for us because of the stress that we face on a day-to-day basis, right? And those glands literally have to secrete all of their hormones to adapt to that stress pattern. Kind of like back in the day when you had a fight or flight response, or we lived in caves and things, you had to run away from a saber-toothed tiger. Well, those adrenal glands were responsible for that. They kick in that response. They change all the hormones. They get the blood flowing to the muscles. They get you to safety. Right?
So that's the adrenaline and the noradrenaline?
Yep, those are two of the hormones made there. But what happens in our society, or what I see with a lot of my patients, is that unlike back in the day, those stressors don't just go away. You don't just escape the tiger and then you're okay. You got to go to work the next day, or you have financial stuff that continues to come up, or you're driving in traffic, and so in the body it doesn't really perceive the difference, right? Every day it's kind of fighting for its life, or it's stress for its life, and over time this kind of takes its toll, right? Or those glands can get a little bit taxed or fatigued, or they don't quite have the reserves that they once did. And so when this happens in an endocrine situation, all of those other hormones start to shift and adjust, and the thyroid gets involved, and the testes or the ovaries get involved, and they all try and maintain that balance as best as possible. But if you're not treating kind of the source of where the depletion is, then you see these conditions continue to develop and progress.
So that's what you were saying, that you treat adrenal fatigue.
Yes.
So how does one treat adrenal fatigue?
Oh, well,
You're saying quit your job, divorce your spouse, get rid of your children,
move to an island,
change your name,
and lay on the beach all day. No, that would be ideal, but a lot of the times it's not feasible, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the support I do is vitamin mineral type support. There's a few vitamins and things that are found very high concentration in those adrenal glands that kind of just get used up quickly. Also, herbs tend to do very well. There's a whole line of what we call adaptogen herbs that are very beneficial for either improving adrenal function if it's fatigued, or if it's on overdrive, it helps kind of calm it down, right? And so that's two places where people tend to get a lot of benefit.
You know, it's tough because we're so busy in society. Most people, I mean, if you go stand out in front of our office at from 6 to 8:30, every time the light turns red, they're backed up 100 yards.
Yeah.
And so they're so busy in our commute that they're hitting the drive-through fast food and grabbing a coffee, a McMuffin.
Right.
Most busy people are eating fast food or out of a box all day long. And if you're eating out of a fast food in a box, you're not picking up the nutrition. As opposed to the vegan yoga instructor,
Sure.
I'm sure she has far less adrenal fatigue than the guy working in a cubicle.
Sure, and food,
an hour of traffic each way.
Food plays a huge role in it, because that's your major source of nutrients, of replenishing those stores, of putting the proper building blocks in your body to be able to do what it needs. I mean, in my opinion, or in my experience, the body's very intelligent. It knows what to do if you put the proper things in, but that does seem to be a roadblock for a lot of people. It's just life, it gets so busy. What are the cheapest, easiest options? Those are fast food options. Maybe not the most nutritious, but
I'm trying to find the quote. I think it was Thomas Edison said, "The doctor of the future will give no medication, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." Mm-hmm. Handsome man, wasn't he?
Indeed.
And but yeah, it's amazing. I'm sorry, when we were talking about anti-aging, mm-hmm. we started with men because I'm a man and I'm a selfish bastard. But the women are out there saying, "Hey, what about the women?"
Right. So along the same lines, my basic strategy is the same: is to get down to the bottom of where the body's changing. Really taking a deep look at the hormones, right? Seeing what's going on there, looking at the blood, looking at all those kind of biological markers, and then comparing those to what symptoms that are going on, right? And so based on that, and we have a lot of different options for how we want to proceed. So some women prefer to do bioidentical hormone replacement, and that's a little more complex than men, because there's estrogen involved, there's progesterone involved, and there's also testosterone involved. And so the picture is a little more complex there.
Estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone.
And testosterone.
Now that's probably confused a lot of people. Most people don't think that women create testosterone in their own body.
No, they do. I mean, not to the degree that a male would, but it's absolutely important in providing for a lot of the same functions or benefits that males get, as far as important for libido, important for energy, important for that mental focus, or just that overall feeling of wellness.
So when they're doing, the men are usually just on testosterone.
Typically, testosterone, some other naturally supportive things, like you mentioned that Thomas Edison quote, where we're looking to be specific with our supplementation to help run certain pathways. So if it's a patient that has a lot of heart disease in their family, then we're looking at doing a lot of cardiovascular support type things. If it's an adrenal fatigue situation, then we're looking at supporting those adrenal glands. Lots of people have chronic liver issues, or their liver's been kind of sluggish for years, and so then we'll look at improving that function, helping.
And what usually makes their liver sluggish? What were they doing?
A number of things. Certainly, if people are partaking in alcohol over time, that'll make it sluggish. But also chronic allergies, food sensitivities. If you're eating a diet that's nutrient deficient, but also your immune system doesn't like those things. Sensitive, you mentioned celiac or gluten and things like that, puts more stress on the body, more strain on the body. That in addition to just day-to-day toxicity, right? The liver is the most important organ for detoxing molecules that we're exposed to through the air, through the food. So it gets a little bit tired.
And it's the second largest organ, isn't it?
I believe so. Next to the skin. Maybe?
The skin.
Yeah.
And you would know that if you ever went when you were little. If you ever went on a deer hunting or an elk hunting, they'd quarter it in the field. But anyway, when you're done cleaning an antelope or an elk, you couldn't lift up that skin. I mean, it's just
right.
Just huge.
Right.
Does anti-aging also involve human growth hormone?
In some clinics, it does. As a naturopath in Arizona, that's something that we're not allowed to prescribe, or the FDA defines very specific conditions that you're allowed to use human growth hormone for. I'm sure there's some doctors out there or clinics who do a lot of experimentation with that, and from what I've seen, there's actually some fairly good research that it helps a lot with preventing heart disease or reversing heart disease and things that in the future could be very beneficial for our society. But as of now, I don't use growth hormone. There's certain ways, and I do have a lot of clients that come in interested in that because it's a big buzzword now, or you read online about it, or you hear about it. There's different ways to help increase that growth hormone without actually taking it endogenously.
What does endogenously mean?
Taking it from outside of the body.
Okay,
You're basically...
doctors always learn 5,000 words of Latin and Greek. Whenever you leave the room, they always turn to the dental assistant, the hygienist, the nurse, and say, "What the hell did he say?" And so I'm always writing all my dentist friends, quit. If your mama didn't use the word, drop it. It's a tough thing.
True.
But so I want to don't get off. I know you should never talk about politics, sex, religion, violence. But what do you when you said that the FDA doesn't like that? The FDA is. I have so many mixed feelings about it because I've been in Ahwatukee for 30 years. Mm-hmm. I can give you the names of little old ladies who were born here in Phoenix, worked their whole life, paid their taxes, and when they got a cancer, the FDA wouldn't allow it in the United States, and they had to sell everything in Ahwatukee and move to not crazy countries. We're talking Scandinavia. We're talking about Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, they have free trade zones for like NAFTA, or they had free. You got all these hospitals in Arizona. You got that big Indian reservation right by Scottsdale. Yep. You got one south of Phoenix, and it has casinos and golf courses. Why don't you make one of those an FDA free trade zone? So that I think it's insulting.
Yeah. That
if I'm going to die, I'm going to die, and I have nothing to lose. And they say, well, here's a therapy, and they're doing it in Germany or Switzerland.
Sure.
I mean, those aren't crazy countries.
No, and a lot of people will, for that reason, they'll go down to Mexico too. It's a little bit closer.
I don't. Not to be insultory. And I love Mexico, and I love that. I don't want to go to Mexico for an experimental treatment. I want to go to a top 20 GDP country with massive infrastructure. I mean, you can't compare Mexico to Germany, Switzerland, Finland, Sweden. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I understand your point exactly. My point was a lot of those doctors who do those treatments, they set up a clinic, in Mexico doing the same things. But absolutely, a lot of that stuff comes from Europe, comes from Germany, comes from Russia, because they've been experimenting with these things and they've been openly using them for 10, 20 years, whereas we're still a little bit behind the times there. We don't want to kind of branch out.
And how many patients do you know right now with lung cancer when Vice News just did a deal where the United States doesn't even have a 5% 5-year success rate with lung cancer. Mm-hmm. Cuba has a 25%.
Yeah, it doesn't make
so now the government's like, well, we'll accelerate this, and they're going to start a study at, I think, Buffalo University. And it's like, accelerate it.
Right.
If you're dying of lung cancer, and Cuba is known for doctors. Mm-hmm. Mexico's not. Cuba has been sending doctors all over the world of the Ebola. The Ebola virus. They're on the first strike team. And it's like, okay, I have lung cancer. I've been a taxpayer my whole life.
Sure.
And I can't. Why isn't there a drug, an FDA-free zone where they could present and say, okay, Howard, this is what Cuba's fine with it. This is what Denmark, Sweden, Switzerland, your government. So maybe it won't be covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I get that. Mm-hmm. But I just find it insulting that there's somebody in the government that would stand between me and a doctor in a life and death situation.
Well, one of the fundamental...
I mean, do you think that's an absurd thought?
No, I don't. I think it's not absurd at all. I think one of the fundamental principles that this country was founded on was a right to choose, to have that right. And if you have these different therapies out there and you have this condition that could be fatal for you, you should have the right to choose whatever treatment that you want. Right, and it should be the role of kind of the government to provide that information to say, okay, well, we have this here. It worked in these cases or didn't work in these cases, and you can speak to your doctors about if that's going to be good for you or not. But ultimately, that should be your choice about how you want to treat yourself or what you want to put in your body or what you don't want to put in your body.
And what's funny is, okay, so when you're my age, I'm 55, so all my 55-year-old dentist friends, those are all a bunch of old conservative farts, right? Mm-hmm. And they're always anti-anything, holistic, anything alternative, until they get the disease. Because when they get high blood pressure, they go to their MD and they just want to give them a pill. Yeah. And then they get high cholesterol and they go to their MD and they're sitting there thinking, well, is there a way I can treat this naturally? I'm like, dude, you're the one holistic dentist in town. They always try to take his license away. The most famous holistic dentist in Colorado, they did take his license away. Right. And it's like freedom of choice. And I think when I read stats that America has 5% of the world's 7.5 billion people, 322 million, and they take 5% of the people take half the antibiotics and half the prescription pills in the world. Right. How could you not say that we prescribe too many pills? Right. I mean, do you think the rest of the world needs to ramp up their prescription pills, or do you think Americans are given too many pills?
I would agree with that, and I think, I don't have any figures off the top of my head, but from what I've seen in the past years, is that when they do these kind of metrics or statistics to look at the health of overall nations, right, and they compare them all side by side, the United States typically isn't found towards the top of that.
Right? Absolutely not.
And so...
They live longer in Canada, Japan, half these... Right. Top 20 countries live longer than us.
And so if that's the case and that's the continual trend, then you got to go back and look at the statistics like you mentioned and say, okay, well, clearly we have enough prescription medications we're giving out, but our outcomes aren't getting better. So what do we need to change? How can we go and look at different options? Or what are they doing over here in Canada or Germany? And how can we...
But we're number one. We're number one.
Right, and
they don't like socialized medicine. When you tell a patient... as a dentist, this is the leading company, 3Shape, out of Copenhagen, Denmark, or out of Helsinki, Finland. They say, are them socialist countries?
Right.
I don't want to listen to these socialist countries. It's like, dude, you've never been there. Right. I mean, Helsinki, Finland, and Copenhagen, Denmark are two of the nicest cities I've ever seen, and I've been to every major city in America.
Right. And usually I avoid having that argument with people as far as do we need a socialized system? Do we not need? What I tell them to look at is some of the outcomes that came out that were forced to come out of that situation. Let's take Germany, for instance. They have a socialized form of healthcare. From what I read, they limit their prescribers or their doctors to so many prescriptions a year. They can only write so many. Okay, so if you give them those limitations, what happens? Well, they're forced to go out and find other options and look at other options, which is usually more natural type alternatives or things that are technologically more advanced, right? And putting their money and their resources into things that aren't going to be a prescription or that are going to be more preventative or regenerative so that they don't have to pull out that prescription book and they're doing these other things. And so, I mean, that climate is what created that. And it's unfortunate that everyone else hasn't picked that up or taken a look at that and said, okay, how can we save on healthcare costs here? Or how can we reduce cost of insurance or cost of going to the doctor or all these things? But there's a lot of money in play, as you know, and when you see those numbers with the prescription rates here, that's billions and billions of dollars. So,
I think it's so funny because you hear a lot of politics chairside from your patients, and how many right-wing conservative grandmas and grandpas they're railing against socialized medicine. I'm like, well, are you on Medicare?
Yeah.
That's socialized medicine. Do you want to quit pay? You want to quit your Medicare? No, I love my Medicare.
Right.
Okay, you love your Medicare. That's socialized medicine.
Sure.
And then the younger people say that'll ruin the country. I'll say, do you ever talk to your grandma and grandpa, mom and dad?
Yeah.
They're on Medicare. Call them up right now and ask them if they hate Medicare.
Right.
What do they say? But anyway, I don't want to get into that. I want to switch gears completely.
Okay.
70%. So healthcare in the year 1900 was 1% of the GDP. By 2000, it was 14% of GDP. Now we're at 2017, and it's 18% of the GDP. And 70% of that cost goes to only treat 4 things: cardiac, pulmonary, diabetes, and cancer. What is your thoughts on why do you think 70% of the bill goes to cardiac, pulmonary, diabetes, and cancers, and how can you help in those 4 areas?
Well, if you compare that to the list of most common causes of death in the country, it's pretty much those 4, right? You have heart disease, you have cancer, you have COPD, which is up there, and you have complications from diabetes, right? And so when you're looking at the cost, it's because people get too far down the road where these issues become prevalent or a problem, and then the medical interventions along those lines are very, very expensive, right? You're talking surgeries, you're talking chemo, radiation, pulmonary. There's a lot of procedures they do or equipment that they need or specialized medications and things. And so if you want to reduce those costs, you really got to go back and you got to start treating those patients 20, 30 years before they develop those conditions. And I think that's an area where our current system kind of falls short, is that we're not focusing on preventing a lot of these things.
We have a great emergency room acute last stage system.
Absolutely. Save lives.
We don't have a good prevent system.
No.
It'd be like if you applied medicine to dentistry, all we would do is extract the tooth or do root canals and crowns. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think that's pretty much a fair analogy?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And so I think that's a place where we need more intervention, right? Or we need to be teaching these people.
When do people listen to you? When do people need to start thinking about preventing cardiac, pulmonary, diabetes, and cancer?
Well, a lot of these things come about, in my opinion, due to lifestyle factors, right? And so diet is a huge part of it. We already touched on how it just...
So you prefer McDonald's or Burger King? When you say diet, which drive-thru are you talking about?
BK Lounge, all the way.
So diet
is an important part of that. The things that you're doing on a daily basis, every single day, over and over and over again, you might not notice a difference from day to day, but you do that for 20 years, and the body's going to have to respond, or it's going to have to adapt to these things that are not necessarily healthy. So diet, exercise are huge ones that...
Okay, so let's talk about diet and exercise. What did all these high schools get rid of that we had when we were little?
PE?
PE.
Yeah.
And the have you ever gone into the cafeteria at lunch?
Not for many years.
Yeah. What do you think they're served in there for lunch?
Probably burgers and
pizzas and French fries.
Yeah.
And
milkshakes.
And I had this argument 30 years ago when I was in dental school. For 4 years, I said to the guy, the dean, I kept saying to him, I said, "This is the most stressful time of our life. Mm-hmm. Why don't we have PE for an hour?"
Right.
And get out there and relax for health. And he's like, we don't have time for PE.
Right.
And it's like, so high schools don't have time for PE. Well, as a doctor, what do you think of the fact that your kids will go to high school, don't have time for PE, and they'll feed them pizza and French fries at lunch?
Well, I think it needs to be reevaluated, right? We got to look at, okay, absolutely, it's important that we have a core of education where we're teaching students to have the skills to be successful in life, but
they're teaching them algebra and trig. Take my dental degree. Since I walked out of there, have I ever used algebra, geometry, trig, calculus one time?
No.
So they walk out of the high, and this is why we started Tukeetown. So we have a format to address Ahwatukee,
sure,
and not North Korea and Putin and all this crap. But I want a forum to address this because would you rather? Are you any children married with children?
Not currently.
That's why he looks so good. God dang, that's why he looks so on. He's single. Remember that. This is the face of a man that was married for 20 years and has 4 kids. Here's the face of a single man. Never married. Ryan, take notes here. But no, but the deal is, let's say you had, I have 4 boys. Imagine you had 4 boys going through Desert Vista like I did. Would you rather them had a course on nutrition or algebra?
Well, it's a tough call, as I do think that math skills or just critical thinking skills are important, but as is nutrition, right? And also exercise, like we talked about.
Yeah, would you rather them take geometry or PE?
If I had to choose, I would have them take their geometry book while they're out there running around doing.
And what percent of the kids, when they graduate in these 2 high schools, go to Chase Bank, set up a checking account, and don't even know how to balance their statement?
Probably 90%.
Yeah,
least.
so it's not life skills. So then you ask yourself,
I agree.
Well, why? Because I'm kind of mad actually, because I spent 1,000 hours studying algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and calculus 1 and calculus 2 and calculus 3. And I look at those 1,000 hours in college, I could have been playing basketball. Right. I could have been swimming in the deal.
Right.
And I would be talking to my dentist. The reason I'm a dentist, my next door neighbor, Kenny Anderson, dentist, and I'd be calling him, Kenny, are we going to have to know this calculus? Hell no.
Yeah.
He said, you'll never use 80% of all the garbage they teach you. It's just true. Something you got to do.
It's true.
But I think that in this healthcare at 18% of the economy, an economist would say, Dr. Roy, healthcare is in a crisis. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, you're spending 18 cents of every dollar on healthcare.
Well, it's probably only going up too, though. I don't foresee those numbers going down anytime soon. Costs keep going up. Cost of insurance keeps going up. And a lot of these conditions that we talked about, you don't see those dropping either.
So you're saying then, to prevent cardiac, pulmonary, diabetes, cancers, you said first, diet and exercise.
Diet and exercise, absolutely. And then on top of that, ways to manage stress, right? Because we see a lot, and we know from our studies that when you're chronically stressed out, the immune system doesn't function as well. That pancreas, liver with monitoring blood sugars and things like that doesn't function as well. People get stressed and maybe they take up smoking and things like that to deal with that stress that long term or is going to cause more problems, either pulmonary or cancer wise and cardiac wise. So generally when I'm discussing these things with patients, it's the day-to-day stuff. It's building these habits into your routine. Another important one is water. I don't have any figures on it, but I can guarantee you that majority of people do not drink enough of water a day, right? And that has effects on the cardiovascular system. It has effects on the pulmonary system. It has effects on possibly allowing more cancer to grow or not flushing out toxins or allowing your immune system to be able to travel to respond to these things, and diabetes as well.
I want to address the 70% goes to cardiac, pulmonary, diabetes, cancer. The next one on the list, and is the fastest growing, mental health. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on mental health? Do you think that's a preventable disease? Do you think it's a hardwired genetic disease?
I think it can have both components, right? And all of these things are on
because you talk about on your website treatments for anxiety and depression, insomnia. These right. are all mental.
And a lot of these things stem from that chronic stress situation, right? It's the person that is overworked, right, and is underpaid or has a lot of mental emotional things that have either happened to them early on in their life or they're currently going through. And it's a lot for that nervous system to be able to adapt to those things. And we don't have a lot of good preventative things for that, or we don't have a lot of good options for people other than, oh, you're depressed or you're anxious. Well, we need to put you on some medication. That's going to make you feel better. And in my opinion, that's it can help temporarily, but it's not the permanent fix, right? In my mind, the body doesn't just do these things for no reason, right? It's trying to maintain that homeostasis. It's trying to maintain that balance as best as possible. Your body wants to be happy, but if the raw materials aren't there, right, or there's all these roadblocks or too much stress and not enough positive nutrients, or your body's not getting the right things, then it's going to change. It's going to adapt. It's going to tell you that something's wrong, right? And so then you got to kind of trace your steps backwards and figure out, okay, what were the circumstances that maybe led me to this life situation?
So, you talk about IV treatments and injections for. What are your IV treatments for? And explain what IV is.
IV is intravenous, so we're doing nutrients that instead of taking a vitamin pill, right, and it goes to the digestive tract and has to be broken down and absorbed and then get into the bloodstream. IV nutrients, we kind of bypass the digestive tract directly. So we're putting the vitamins, nutrients, minerals directly through the vein, right? So it gets directly into the bloodstream. Less work for the body to be able to assimilate those nutrients.
And when is one of your patients a candidate for an IV treatment?
So a few different scenarios here. I have a lot of patients that just do it for general wellness. So they might come in once a month or so and get what we call an IV drip or an IV push. All your B vitamins, B12, magnesium, vitamin C, trace minerals, things that are just going to help the body kind of restore, rebuild, make sure that you have all the raw materials for the body. So that's one. Another, people will come in if they're acutely ill, let's say cold or flu, and they need some extra vitamin C, they need some extra immune support. That's a great way to get it into the body very quickly versus having to take a lot of pills or capsules or powders and things like that. And then third is people who have chronic diseases. So for instance, cancers or autoimmune diseases. Their bodies get so depleted over that process or over time, it's much easier to start building back up those tissues or building up the body or improving the immune system with intravenous nutrients versus having to digest them and go all the way through the tract that way.
And my job is to ask questions that they're sitting at home wondering, what did he say? What are autoimmune diseases?
So autoimmune diseases, another condition that seems to be on the rise in our country, and no one's sure as to why. These are conditions where your body's immune system attacks your own healthy cells. So common ones people probably heard of, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. Those are probably the most prevalent there. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is another one. That's a thyroid condition that seems to be more common. Type 1 diabetes is actually an autoimmune disease that a lot of people don't realize that. Celiac disease can be another one where we have a lot of autoantibodies. And basically what it is
and NMS.
And MS is
but that's why I'm selfishly honing on this, is they're finding out that these autoimmune diseases run in families.
Certainly.
And so like in our family tree, I'm a thyroid, we got celiac sprues, we got the type 1 diabetes. Mm-hmm. In fact, we were looking at our deal, our family was looking at the deal, and if you showed it to someone who specializes in this, they say, oh, one of you is going to get MS. You can't have this many insulin-dependent diabetics, this many celiac sprues, this many thyroids, and then so this big... Right. So we're all on the lookout like, one of us going to get MS, but these are fast-growing autoimmune is
fairly prominent, and what you have here is, and you mentioned, probably a genetic component, but in my mind, that's not the be-all, end-all to if you're going to get the disease or not. Sometimes it plays more of a role than other times, but the environment plays another important role, right? And we know this through a lot of the studies they've done in what's called epigenetics, or looking at how those cells get expressed or how those autoantibodies get expressed. And so
I want to talk to another one I found on your website. One that you hear about a lot is insomnia. When you go to work, there's so many people that go to work and say, gosh darn it, I couldn't sleep last night.
Right.
God, I hate this. And they just laid there in bed. Do you see insomnia much? Is it any age group? Is it more likely older, younger, boy, girl, any?
A decent amount, and in my practice, it doesn't seem to follow any specific trend like that with age or gender. But what I see a lot of is insomnia due to that chronic stress factor, going back to that. And those are specifically the adrenal glands, right?
I don't know if it's because they talk about it more or they're just more comfortable talking, but it seems like I hear the most complaints from retired senior citizens. In fact, I had a grandma and grandpa in the other day, and they said, well, let me tell you something. When you're our age, and I think they were 10 years older than me, they were about 65. They said, when you're our age, and it goes, half your friends have insomnia. But that's anecdotal. I mean, this is one grandma and grandpa saying this to me. And
I often wondered that myself, because you hear that from your grandparents. Oh, they just sleep 4 hours, and then they're up and they're going. And so I'm not sure how much as a part of that natural kind of aging process, or your body not needing as much of that sleep. Versus if there is really a physiological type thing going on, and it's something that needs to be addressed or treated. So.
Now this is we call this Ahwatukee Uncensored because they get all the cleaned up, politically correct news in so many sources.
Anywhere else,
yeah, nobody wants to talk about. And what I do, and my theory is this: is I want to talk to you as if you're my friend, and I think it disrespects you when I sugarcoat something for you.
Yeah.
And what's weird in society is the newspapers and the medias might sugarcoat everything. But when you have a Thanksgiving dinner, your crazy uncle's running at the mouth, and these are real thoughts. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And
there's a book written by, it was called The K Factor, written by an N.M.D. and a Ph.D. And he did a study at Mayo Clinic of 8,000 people that only 8% of the patients on high blood pressure medication had to be on high blood pressure medication, and he showed how 92% wouldn't with diet, exercise, keeping to a gram of sodium a day. And all I want to ask you is the fact that that's my point. I have noticed my dentist friends for 30 years, they would say, well, you need to go to the doctor and get on high blood pressure medication.
Right.
Then when that buddy got high blood pressure, 9 times out of 10, he said, I need to join Lifetime Fitness. I need to quit eating out of a box. I need to lose 30 pounds. So my question is do you agree with that study that high blood pressure could be treated more successfully with diet and exercise than by taking a pill?
I think there's a couple different factors involved. I think definitely it's worth the shot, and it should be your first line intervention.
What should be your first line intervention?
Is diet, is exercise, is looking at lifestyle factors.
But is that the first intervention in the American healthcare system?
Typically, no. I think they still write it that way in the guidelines, but typically I'm worried that if I don't do this, maybe you have a heart attack and then I get sued. So you should take the
medication. Because a million attorneys. And you know how many times in Ahwatukee I've written a grandma or grandma a prescription. And she said, well, do I already have that? And she opens up her purse. She's got 9 different bottles.
Right.
And I'm sitting there, let's go over that. And she doesn't know what 7 of them are for.
Right.
I mean, am I crazy or have you seen this?
I see it all the time, and usually what you have is an initial medication, maybe 1 or 2, and then from there they return to the doctor. Well, now I'm having this side effect. Okay, well we'll add that in to prevent you from having your reflux. Well, now my reflux is causing me to be B12 deficient. Okay, well let's add something in to help you with that, and it just kind of spirals from there, where it's one after the other, and then you see these cases 2-3 years down the road, and it's hard to pick the head from the tail because everything is just so complex and confusing. You don't know where it started.
So I want you to focus in on high blood pressure because I hear people. We're taking blood pressures on the patients.
Sure.
You see a lot of it, and a lot of people. So go through when do you start seeing high blood pressure start becoming an issue? What age? And what would be your initial to try to prevent that or get it back down? Yeah,
typically I'm seeing this, I would say around 40s to 50s is most common, but that's not to say I don't have younger people that come in as early as 20 and suddenly they have high blood pressure. Now, part of that can be a genetic predisposition, but what's important to understand about high blood pressure is that there's typically 3 things that could be causing it that you have to keep in mind. One is the cardiovascular system itself, right? If there's an issue there, if there's inflammation going on, or those vessels just aren't what we call elastic anymore, or stretchy anymore, that's going to increase the blood pressure, right? They can't dilate or loosen up to lower that pressure. The other one is the kidneys. So if people have chronic kidney disease, which is probably the lowest cause, right? But if diabetes is in play, and those kidneys have been damaged over time, they can't filter out the water, therefore more pressure, more volume kind of in the system there. And the third one that I think is probably most common or has the biggest component is the nervous system, right? So people don't realize that your nervous system is completely filled through your body and envelops itself around the veins and the arteries, right? And so when your nervous system is stressed, like we deal with stress all the time, what does it do? It squeezes those vessels, it squeezes the veins, it squeezes the arteries. And that's meant to kind of help get you through that stressful situation. But if we're not de-stressing our bodies, then that blood pressure remains high over time. And it's not necessarily because the cardiovascular system has a problem. It's because of that nervous system, that fight or flight sympathetic response is always on.
Who's that handsome guy?
That's me.
That's you.
That's me.
So what
That's
are my
awesome.
Ahwatukee homies going to find at your website, PhoenixAntiAgingClinic.com?
So they'll find a list of our therapies that we do there. For people
Adrenal fatigue, anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, insomnia, autoimmune diseases, pain management, hormonal disorders, IV treatments.
Mm-hmm. So a wide variety of things. For people that are interested in those, I do like to offer free consults to people, so I'm always happy to talk to them about specific questions that people have, or just so they feel comfortable. A lot of people have never seen a naturopath. They're not quite sure what we're going to do, if I'm going to do some voodoo type stuff, or if we're going to talk about real science and options and things of that nature.
Well, the ultimate wealth is health.
Absolutely.
And to win the Phoenix lottery and to lose your life, I mean, that's not a trade. Can I give him away your email?
Yeah, absolutely.
His email is phoenixantiagingclinic@gmail.com. I've know many fans of yours since I practiced across the street from you. Mm-hmm. I think you're an amazing man, and I think that it was so nice of you to give up your lunch to come over to my house and talk to Ahwatukee for an hour. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for having me.